This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
Do you remember where you were 5 years ago today? It's mid-March 2020, and if you were in Michigan back then, chances are you were at home, by order of the governor. Look, I don't know what it was like for you, but for me, lockdowns were a painful time. And I wouldn't open that wound. I wouldn't draw from that vein if I didn't think that the end game were just. I believe it is. I believe that the history of what happened in 2020 will decide the future in 2028 and beyond. But first, we have to learn the lessons of history. One of my many causes at the Enjoyer Podcast is truth and reconciliation. For the panic of the COVID pandemic, for lockdowns, for school shutdowns, business shutdowns, nursing home deaths. I believe we should talk about Gretchen Whitmer and nursing home deaths the same way we do Rick Snyder in the Flint water crisis. In both cases, tragic loss of life resulted from ego and an unwillingness to adjust to reality. Every single person in Flint and Lansing knew damn well that the Flint water plant wasn't ready to treat water before the water was sent out to people. And they pressed the start button anyway. And everybody on Team Whitmer knew that nursing homes, unlike restaurants, couldn't build little igloos that are kind of outside, kind of inside. No, at a nursing home, the building is the building. There's no extra wings of the building sitting unused, waiting to be brought out of mothballs at a time such as this by order of governor. And even if there were segregated wings, and that was a possibility, which it isn't, but even if there were, unless there was segregated staff, with some of them working on the well side and others on the sick side, and no crossover between them, then segregation wouldn't help either. Because as much power as Gretchen Whitmer had, she did not have a magic wand. She did not, by order of the governor, have the ability to make 6 segregated nursing homes materialize overnight, even if she proclaimed it to be so. Nursing home policy is where Whitmer's mythical powers ran into a brick wall called reality. These days, it seems just about everybody is a member of Team Reality, and the doors to that church are always open. Hit me up on Twitter, down I-75. I can walk you through the membership process. Today, 5 years later, nobody could ever imagine letting some awkward lady who dresses like a pothole decide whether they can go outside or work to provide for their family. But in 2020, tons of people in Michigan, including, I'm guessing, some of you, were perfectly willing to give Whitmer that power. I can almost hear I can hear it in your voice now saying, "Why are you being unreasonable, James? It's just 2 weeks." It's kind of like Anna Hoffman made a great point when we talk about boys playing girl sports in Michigan. They say the same thing. It's just 2 trans. It's just 2 weeks. My thesis is that your reasonableness can and will and is used against you. So if you've ever known anyone in the medical field, you know that when there's work to do, people jump right to it. They jump right in and they help their colleagues, knowing that if they don't pick up the burden, their colleague will carry it alone. And so people from the well side of the nursing home were always going to pitch in on the sick side. And people from the sick side were always going to help on the well side. It's the nature of the business. Anyone could have anticipated this. And Dr. Joni Caldoun, Chief Medical Officer under Whitmer, did anticipate it. On the March 12th press conference that started it all, the same press conference where school closures were announced, Caldoun said nursing homes should limit entry as best as possible and screen people who do enter to make sure they're not sick.
Long-term care facilities, nursing homes, and other institutions that take care of the elderly or those with chronic medical conditions should limit non-essential visitors as much as possible and screen staff and visitors for temperatures and respiratory symptoms prior to entry into the facility.
Instead, Gretchen Whitmer did the worst of both worlds. She kept nursing home residents isolated from their families, which are often their only lifeline to the world outside that nursing home. And then she brought in sick old people to the nursing home that the elders could not escape. And so by the time Whitmer made that order, she was more than a month into using those emergency powers. She realized that she liked how the power felt in her hand. She liked being able to say, jump, and 10 million people ask, how high? But what she really liked are the Klieg lights, the cameras, the microphones, the spectacle of the panic. You ever have that meeting at work that could have been an email? That was the Whitmer daily press conference. A dashboard could have done what Whitmer did and would have saved everybody a lot of time every day. But then how would you have seen Gretchen Whitmer's face on your TV that day? And so all of this lays at the feet of one woman, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. All of it was done, at least in those early days that we're talking about, to position Whitmer as a vice presidential running mate, a running mate for Joe Biden. This episode will not be my last word on COVID, but my hope as I start this project, as we talk more about truth and reconciliation 5 years later, is that 2025 will be my last year talking about it. And so my goal this year is to leave behind a body of work that we can refer to. I want it to be the definitive dot connecting on exactly what happened in Michigan in 2020 and exactly why it happened. This episode will focus on the early pandemic, between its first arrival in Michigan and early June after the death of George Floyd. I argue that Gretchen Whitmer's leadership was unsafe at any speed during the pandemic. Whitmer's reign was bad for kids who were locked out of school, even though COVID affected them the least. It was bad for old people who were locked away from their families and simultaneously shut in with sick old people. And it was bad for anyone who wakes up with the vision for how to spend their days and spend their time. I'm a self-starter. I wake up saying, here's what I want. I don't have to flip through the news pages to decide how I want my day to go. In extreme cases, something can distract me and bring itself onto my radar, but how I spend my time generally starts with me. And so normal people didn't need a reset, great or otherwise. We were too busy putting one foot in front of the other. And then, in March 2020, elected officials from every government podium, from Whitmer in the governor's office to Trump in the White House, were standing up there telling you to stop. This podcast, and this episode in particular, is for the people who never stopped, who never complied, who were never reasonable, not for 2 weeks, not even for 2 minutes. This podcast is for people who know that freedom is God-given, not Gretchen Whitmer granted. And 2025, thank God, that describes almost everybody. But in 2020, the scene of the crime, the events in question, that cohort was small and shockingly so. This episode is for your grandmother. Maybe you called her Gigi. Over her 80 years, she built a lifestyle of love spanning many memories and generations. Her grandmother before her died around 80. You add up their 2 lifespans together and you're back to the end of the U.S. Civil War. It's a beautiful life she built. And then COVID hit. It wasn't the pandemic so much that changed her life, it was the panic surrounding it. An 80-year-old woman was just young enough to have missed the Spanish flu of a century prior. And so these conditions, this isolation from her loved ones, was no doubt disorienting. Imagine living in a high-trust society, perhaps in rural Michigan, all your life. You're surrounded by faces you know and love. And then you end up spending your last days on Earth surrounded by masked men, not even seeing so much as a smile from another human being. Your Gigi had built a lifestyle of love, but her body failed her. And because her body failed her, and because she couldn't live at home anymore, now she was subject to Queen Whitmer's rules. And Queen Whitmer's rules turned your grandma's nursing home into a hospital that you were not allowed inside to be her advocate. Her grandkids and great-grandkids or kids weren't allowed inside the building to help brighten her last days. They were perfectly healthy people, but here was the governor telling you to assume you have COVID. And yes, we have that video. Let's begin at the beginning. After letting the 2020 Democrat presidential primary go uninterrupted on March 8th, Whitmer declares a state of emergency citing two presumptive positive cases of COVID. By March 12th, when Whitmer held the press conference we're clipping from, Michigan had 12 cases. This was presented as a dire emergency. Look behind me at the demeanor here from Whitmer and her team. It's almost funereal. For 12 cases. What's wrong with this picture? Now, at the same moment, our neighbor to the south, Ohio, had 100,000 cases, and Michigan had 12. And yet, here was our governor telling people to assume they have COVID. Without evidence, Whitmer was soon promoting, and the media soon reprinting, a conspiracy theory called asymptomatic spread, which is the idea that people who don't show any signs of having COVID are actually carrying it and actually spreading it and actually getting other people sick. Nobody believes this. There's never any reason to believe this. But our governor said it anyway. Take it from here, Big Gretch.
Even if you feel healthy and are asymptomatic, you can unknowingly be carrying and spreading the virus. Assume that you are, and take these orders seriously.
A good journalist might have asked Whitmer, how do you know that? How can you say that? Or conversely, if the 10 million people of Michigan should all assume they have COVID, why exactly is this an emergency? If we've all had COVID and don't feel sick, why should we panic? And so on the one hand, you're told that this is a vicious virus. It'll rip right through you. And from the other side of the same face, you're told that your symptoms could be so mild that you might not even notice being sick. Both these things can't be true, except in the pages of MLive, Freep, and the Detroit News. Down in Ohio, our neighbors to the south, the numbers were much different. At the same time Whitmer was throwing this funeral over 12 cases, Ohio had 100,000. Now, how likely is it that neighboring states could have numbers that different? Ohio's number, 100,000, seems more in line with what you'd expect from a global virus than 12 does. Yet here's Whitmer panicking over the 12.
We had 2 yesterday. We are at 12 today. We expect more to come. We are taking these cases very seriously and will continue to take every step to mitigate spread of the virus and keep Michiganders safe.
By early June, Michigan was still claiming to only have 60,000 cases total. This is in a state of 10 million, where our neighboring state had 100,000 cases the first week. 3 months after that, we still only had 60,000. What's wrong with that picture? I say all that to say this. Every COVID number you ever saw in Michigan was fake because cases were fundamentally, systematically undercounted. Now, I'm not just talking a routine undercount in the sense that we missed some. I'm talking about a systematic undercount, and that there's a lot of people just like me who were never tested for COVID, never reported having it to any official channel, but we did get it, and multiple times. Unless they're trawling people's tweets and saw me talking about it and assume that I was telling the truth and not just joking, the state would have never known I had COVID 2-3 times. So what exactly is that case number based on, if not the truth? And I get that you can't test everybody for COVID every day, but it would have been really helpful throughout the pandemic if we were reading from the same sheet of music. If they were saying that, okay, we have 60,000 tests positive, but what we know about the virality of it, probably 4 million people have gotten it. Something like that would have been helpful. So why didn't it happen? Why didn't it happen? Why did that not happen? That would have been the only thing that made sense. Why didn't it happen? Because fear is the product they were selling. At the same time Michigan was claiming to only have 60,000 total cases in June, it also claimed about 5,700 deaths. But Whitmer just said to assume you have it, remember? And the global nature of the virus makes that a fair assumption. Maybe not that you have it at any given moment, but that you've gotten it by now, that it probably did arrive in America before March 10th, before Gretchen Whitmer admitted to it, that you may have already had it or had it several times by now. Regardless of what you were told in 2020, a global virus didn't just skip over you because it couldn't jump 7 feet. You saw that news, right? Social distancing, which you based your entire life on for years, the 6 feet thing, completely made up. There's no data. There is no data. One guy dreamed it up, and it wound up in your news. And you believed it because you haven't learned to question the things that come over official channels. Hopefully what happened that year taught you to do so. So 5,700 deaths out of 60,000 cases, that's a pretty serious number. That's damn near a 10% death rate. Oh my God, what's going to happen? What if everybody gets COVID? Are we going to lose 10% of the state, 1 million people? But 5,700 deaths in 500,000 cases, less so. In 1 million cases, it's even less. And in 10 million cases, it's a lot less. So if everybody can assume they have it, or will get it, or had already gotten it, and we had 5,700 deaths, what were we panicking about? You want to see how else the numbers were fake and gay in Michigan? On May 14th, Whitmer claimed credit for saving 3,500 lives, citing a University of Michigan study. So we were 2 months into the pandemic, and here's Whitmer claiming credit for saving lives and even putting a hard number on it. But by the end of that Free Press story, Dr. J, the chief medical officer, was saying that nursing home data in Michigan was still inaccurate in both cases and deaths. So on page 4, Whitmer can say confidently that she saved X number of lives, and the Free prints that without question. But on page 9, Whitmer's team admits it doesn't have a handle on a much smaller, much more self-segregated number for nursing homes. And all of this was printed as is without any interplay between the parts, as if journalism is not smart enough to connect the dots. A worthy story might have asked the governor, how can you be certain of all these lives you're taking credit for saving while being fuzzy about nursing homes when nursing homes are directly in your wheelhouse? Why would I believe A when you just told me B is fuzzy and B is the number I could only come to you for? Instead, the Free just printed whatever Whitmer said. I guess when you're famous enough, they just let you do it. As we seek truth and reconciliation for what happened in 2020, I believe the media was a big part of the problem. I beat up on the Detroit News a lot, so today I'll focus on the Free Press. Check out this beauty of a story behind me. From May 15th, 2020, 250 protesters defy rain and Whitmer. Now, it's been a while. I just turned 41. But when I took 9th grade government, I learned about the U.S. Constitution and this thing called the First Amendment. It gives Americans the right to free speech, but also the right to peaceably assemble. It was only when I opened up the yellowed pages of the Free Press that I had to learn that exercising that first and most American of all rights, free speech and peaceable assembly, had to be done in defiance of Queen Whitmer. Of course, this assumes that she has the right to override my First Amendment rights or my God-given rights, and neither one she does. Reporters like M.L. Elric and Joe Guillen, the bylines on that story, they love to say that they don't write their own headlines. Well, guys, maybe you need to, because stuff like that is an embarrassment. I'm embarrassed to have read it. I can't imagine what it feels like to see your name on that stuff. It gives the impression that the reporter doesn't understand how America or constitutional government works, that they actually think one lady in a pantsuit could run a state of 10 million people by her lonesome, and anyone who says otherwise is in defiance. If you want to know where that sneer comes from when people refer to Queen Whitmer, it's from headlines like this, which present Michigan as if it was or could be or should be run on a whim by one woman. Faced with a once-in-a-lifetime chance to defend constitutional government in Michigan and to be the voice of the 10 million people of Michigan, the legacy media instead rebranded as Whitmer's press office. Rather than cover Whitmer and ask the questions any human being with brain activity would ask, they put their little heads together and decided to cover for Whitmer. There might be 1,000 monkeys in Lansing, but I promise they ain't writing Shakespeare. Their work was embarrassing. It has no place in our news pages. It's a bad fit even in our archives. But when you walk memory lane in 2020, this stuff is all you'll find. You can almost see the exact moment when the media turned its brain off and acted as a herd. It took on the mantra that we're all in this together. Except that's not where we want our journalists to be. Together. Not with each other and not with the people they're covering. That relationship, that coverage relationship, that professional relationship should involve some friction. Instead, the Lansing media traded the power to hold the governor to account for the ability to fluff her pillow. When watchdogs become lapdogs, it's not easy to revert back. And in the years since 2020, the Lansing media has found this impossible. Over the years, they've stayed at Whitmer's feet, even as the treats from the governor grow even more intermittent. Back to the numbers, back to COVID, back to how we got here. You're probably wondering how we got here. On May 28, 2020, Dr. J took aim at Carl Mankey, an elderly barber in Owasso. Carl the barber was 77 back then. He had bills to pay. He couldn't just hand in an IOU from the government. He couldn't just hand in a note from Big Gretch. So he stayed open during the pandemic. And Whitmer came at him with the full weight of the state, even targeting his occupational license. On May 28th, Dr. J told the Freep that Carl the barber and his open barber shop were an imminent threat to public health. 2 weeks before that, when protesters gathered in Lansing to oppose lockdowns, Whitmer warned publicly that such protests could prolong her orders. This was the governor threatening to use her emergency powers to manipulate her political opposition. The media reported this, they ran the words, but they didn't question it. They didn't question the dynamic. They didn't question the unconstitutional use of government. They didn't question targeting it against protesters. They didn't question anything. Then on Memorial Day, George Floyd died. Just a few days later, early that next week, Queen Whitmer herself marched alongside Black Lives Matter, and this is where everything came undone. Either protests and the workday are an imminent threat to public health, or they're not. We were told that the global virus doesn't care about our need to be free, so why the hell would it offer an exemption to Black Lives Matter? And this is where a thinking media would have really shined. When I noted Whitmer's presence at the Highland Park protest, my colleague at the time, Craig Mauger, said we should write another story about it. We should contrast that with her stay-at-home orders. It was a good idea, but a better idea would have been to contrast what Whitmer said and what she did related to the George Floyd protests. Contrast that to what she was saying about anti-lockdown protests just weeks ago and what her team said about Carl the barber just days ago. The meat was there on the bone, but nobody in Lansing took the obvious bite. Why? The 2020 news archives capture the exact moment when the Whitmer Media Alliance was built in Michigan. Until George Floyd died, there was every reason to believe Whitmer would be Joe Biden's running mate. And so that March 12th press conference and all those that followed are best understood as audition tape. Those were not acts of government. That was audition tape, and it didn't go well. And so that's why the funeral demeanor over the 12 cases on March 12th, Whitmer was acting. She's just a bad actor. She doesn't know how to display emotions appropriate for situations, so she just put on a sad face, plastered it up for 20 minutes. We all knew Biden was going to pick a woman in 2020 because we know Democrats pick candidates for DEI purposes. Not because they're good politicians, certainly not because they're good people. It's why Biden himself was picked. This was a white man the coalition could form around. A woman was thought to balance out the ticket. But then George Floyd died. And now Biden didn't just need a woman, he needed a black woman. To admit the inevitable, Whitmer planted a story in the AP publicly bowing out of consideration. It is not at all an exaggeration to say that George Floyd cost Gretchen Whitmer her best shot at the White House. And so if it was skin color and the death of St. George Floyd that kept Whitmer out of the White House as VP in 2020, and if it was bad timing and events that kept her from taking a shot in 2024, it'll be Whitmer's record during the pandemic that will stop her in 2028. We will see to it. We will connect the dots. You will share our work with your friends, and every time we see Gretchen Whitmer's face, we'll tell these stories. Gretchen Whitmer got off easy in 2022. That's when James Craig was wiped out in a signature collection scandal, and Whitmer skated to re-election and even overtook the legislature with Democrat control. But you can't escape a reckoning forever. We can't, and Gretchen Whitmer won't. After truth comes reconciliation. It must, and it will.